was to demonstrate to them the route that we'll be taking when the tunnel is reconstructed, the L-line tunnel reconstruction project from next April. So what we wanted to do with the electeds, and we're very grateful to the elected officials that came out today behind me, thank you for coming, was to really talk them through the route, talk them through how the route works, both on the Brooklyn side, across the Williamsburg Bridge, through Lower Manhattan, and then through here onto 14th Street. So the reason we were a little bit late getting back to you is because there are lots of questions, which we welcome, because obviously this is a big deal. This is a very big project that we need to undertake. The good news is, talking to the elected officials, everyone gets the need that Superstorm Sandy wreaked such damage in that tunnel with not just water, but with salt water, that we have to bite the bullet. We have to get this job done. But what we were explaining to the elected officials was just how much thought we've put into this transit plan, how many options we've looked at, and how the actual plan will work, particularly across the Williamsburg Bridge with the intense bus shuttle that needs to take place. There are a lot of questions about it, and the reason for that is, if you were to just isolate the L line as its own transit system, it would rank among the top 10 transit systems in North America. It's that busy that it would feature in the top 10 by ridership. So that really explains the magnitude of the challenge before us, and we were taking the elected officials through the various options, be they subway, the buses, the ferry that will be put on, the HOV lanes, the ticketing arrangements, the SBS routes that will be operating, the 4 special L dedicated routes that will be operating, and here in Manhattan, the M14 SBS that will be operating throughout the period that the tunnel is closed. So I thought it was really good. I'm very grateful to, first up, the elected officials for giving up their time to come today and for all the questions. We took away some further actions that we need to consider further. But I'm also very grateful to Polly and her team, Commissioner Trottenberg and her team. DOT have been fantastic throughout this planning process, and we'll be working very closely with them throughout the closure and with our colleagues at New York Police Department, without whom we can't get this thing to work properly. I'll just ask Commissioner Trottenberg if she'd like to make a couple of points.
Thanks, President Barker.
Step up to the mic.
Sure. And I'll just echo what Andy's just said. I think we had a great ride this morning. Certainly from the DOT point of view, responsible for making sure that we can keep the MTA's buses moving, that we can keep the streets safe, that we can also accommodate the surge of pedestrians and cyclists. I think we laid out our plans for elected officials. We got to see them firsthand, where the buses will be turning, where we'll be putting in bus boarding islands and bike lanes, how the hours will work on the Williamsburg Bridge. We got a lot of great feedback, and I think we're continuing to refine plans, although I think we're getting pretty close to a final plan. And I know we are lucky to be joined by elected officials from both sides of the river, and maybe we'll start it off, of course, with our Manhattan Borough President, Gail Brewer.
Thank you very much. I want to thank DOT and Transit and all my colleagues and the community boards, all the community boards for the relevant agency areas were there. And I think particularly seeing the bus situation crossing a bridge, which is so heavily used by bicyclists, cars, and buses and trucks, how that is going to work with enforcement by NYPD. And then when we get to the Manhattan side, great questions from elected officials and community boards who know their districts so well. You know, how do 7,000 people at Stuytown get on the bus? What's the coordination between the ferry and the bus? How do we deal with pedestrians and all the kinds of stops that are going to have to be taking place on 14th Street, etc.? What about the turn on Kenmare? All those kinds of questions came up and were answered very effectively. So I really appreciate the effort that the agencies and all the staffs made to put this together. There's nothing better than actually seeing what is going to happen, and I think as time goes on, we'll have to do a dry run sometime much closer to the date to see exactly how all the L1, 2, 3, 4 buses, what's electric, what's not, and so on. But thank you very much. It was a real insight into the closure, and I think we all understand that it's possible to do. We're looking also for an app, something that will have real-time information and coordination through all the different agencies and the people actually doing the work. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Gail. We're lucky to be joined by actually state elected officials and council members. We have Senator Hoyman, Senator Prasad, Assembly Member Epstein. Would you all like to come up? And I don't know, would anyone want to say a few words? It's optional, but
Sure. Never stand between a politician and a microphone. But I just wanted to thank the Commissioner and President Byford and the Borough President, my colleagues in government. It's so good to see the city and the state working so well together. And they have a Herculean task ahead of them. In Manhattan alone, 50 to 60,000 riders are on the L every day just in Manhattan, so we know what the challenges are. We talked about things such as alternative fuels. We rode on an electric bus on the busway, which was quiet and clean and smooth. And President Byford has committed to getting as many electric buses on the road as possible. So we in the state need to do our part to help fund this process moving forward. So I'm committed to that. Thank you, President Byford. Thank you, Commissioner Trottenberg.
I'm Senator Roxanne Prasad, and my role this morning was in taking the ride was to understand what the people of the other end, coming from Canarsie, will encounter when they have to do the transfer. And I'm looking forward. I thank you all for what you did today, but I'm looking forward to seeing a tour that commences at the Rockaway station, and so that we can go through what the passenger will go through when they have to change, when they're missing those stops, so that we can go back to the residents of Canarsie, East New York, Brownsville, and let them understand it. Because too often the narrative around the L train is that the entire L train is being shut down, and we're constantly having to tell the residents of the other end that the L train will not be affected when you're coming from Canarsie and you're transferring at Broadway Junction. We have challenges at Broadway Junction that we have to address. So for us, there's still a lot to be answered, and I really appreciate everything that was done today, and we look forward to continuing to work with you. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator. Now, Assemblyman Epson, who is certainly a fierce defender of Stuytown and making sure we get it right for those residents.
Oh, thank you. And I just want to thank you both for taking the time personally to be with us on a bus for 2 hours. It really shows your commitment to being with us. And the concerns we have as residents are the same concerns that our constituents are going to have. Safety, how quickly can we get around the city, and ensuring that we all have a safe ride. And so I know there are concerns about the volume and the buses, but I think we're going to continue to work together, continue to have more public presentations about what's happening. I know you're both committed to talking to people in our district and across the city of what's going on. So we're all planned for next April and rolling it out enough time ahead of time so we're all set to understand what the implications are for our community. Our officers are going to be working with you as things go forward. I wanted to thank you both for your time.
Thank you, Senator. And now we have at least two council members. We have Brooklyn council members here. Councilmember Reynoso right in the heart of Williamsburg. Councilmember Levin along the Brooklyn waterfront. Would you all like to say a word?
Thank you. I'm just going to say it in Spanish. Le quiero dar las gracias al Metro y al Departamento de Transportación por el trabajo que hicieron hoy en una gira que entramos de Brooklyn a Manhattan. Nosotros lo que queremos es a ver cómo la experiencia de todos los que van a usar el tren y van a usar el autobús, cómo va a ser la experiencia de ellos. Nosotros vimos muchas cosas interesantes y también muchas preguntas sobre el problema que creemos que vamos a ver para asegurar que ellos sigan encima de las soluciones de los problemas que tenemos. Pero me siento muy cómodo y muy orgulloso de poder estar en esta gira porque el trabajo que están haciendo los comisionados y la cabeza del metro es algo que nos podemos sentir cómodos que están trabajando juntos. Finalmente la ciudad y el estado trabajando juntos en algo. Les quiero dar las gracias a ellos y a los constituyentes de mi distrito, sentirse que estamos haciendo todo lo posible para asegurar que su pasaje sea lo más cómodo posible. Gracias.
Councilmember Levin.
Thank you very much, Commissioner Trottenberg. I just want to thank you and President Byford and your entire teams for setting this up today. I think that it gave us a very tactile and real-world vision of how this is all going to work. I've been saying all along that New Yorkers, L train riders, we can handle a little bit of impact to our daily commutes. I would say not more than 20-30 minutes each way in additional time before it really has a significant impact on people's lives, on the amount of time they can spend with their families or the amount of time that they could be productive at work. And one thing that President Byford and Commissioner Trottenberg have shown is that 90% of riders are projected to not have more than 10 minutes additional commute time each way. And so that's a significant achievement, but it's going to continue to take a lot of work, and we're going to make sure that as this is moving forward, that we're conscious enough of the impacts and the challenges so that we can make adjustments in real time and on the fly, because it's a very complex situation with so many different transportation impacts on our roads and the MTA system. And so this has to continue, but I think this level of engagement is really encouraging. We're about 7, 8 months out, and I think that this level of engagement really needs to be sustained. But obviously, seeing from President Byford and Commissioner Trottenberg, the city and state are working really well together, and we expect that to continue. So really, thank you very much.
I think we're ready to take questions, but probably they'll come to you first.
Yeah, so we've seen this emergence of a couple of luxury van services that are offering transportation across the bridge. I'm wondering if that is a concern to you, particularly when you're trying to run 80 buses an hour during peak hours, and whether that's causing you to reconsider the HOV restriction and maybe push it out.
Okay, well, I'm sure Commissioner Trottenberg will wish to comment as well. I mean, my view will be, we still believe that the majority of people will want to take transit, as in transit that the MTA provides. Our aim is to make the bus shuttle across the Williamsburg Bridge very convenient and very effective. So we don't want to see a big bus jam across the bridge, and that's why we are going to be doing everything possible to discourage people in single occupancy vehicles, and for that matter even private luxury minibuses. The more people that use the bus service, and the more that we can get that bus service running relentlessly and effectively across that bridge, the better for everyone, the better for the environment, and the less the disruption to people. So yeah, people may set something up. I still believe that we can make this bus service so attractive, that plus the ferry and the alternate subway routes, that people will still want to use that, because of course it will be at the cost of an MTA fare, which I suggest will be way less than any luxury bus service.
I think I'll just echo what you said, Andy. We agree. I mean, our goal here is to try and get people to ride, to get people to ride the most efficient modes. That is going to be buses, that's going to be bikes, it is not going to be the luxury minivans. And we think a lot of them, although they will qualify for the HOV lane, they won't qualify to use the dedicated bus lane. So we are hoping you will still get a faster, smoother ride if you take an MTA bus.
So based on your experience, what do you feel you need to tweak based on the ride today?
I think, I mean, the biggest impression I got was just the need to make sure that as far as we can, all construction is complete by the time that this bus shuttle needs to go into action, because in the course of that ride we saw a lot of construction happening, which is kind of normal business. It's construction season, I get it, but what we cannot have is construction that could and should have been completed. We cannot have people blocking the bus lanes. We saw a bit of evidence of that. Trucks and various other people blocking the bus lanes. We must get that level of detail right. I think the other thing that's really important, and we had some very insightful questions from our elected officials standing behind me, was the need to make sure that we have very effective, very dynamic on-route supervision. And that to me is critical, and that falls to both the Commissioner and myself. Certainly for transit, we are practicing our contingency plans in advance extensively, and we will have supervisors whose mandate and remit it will be on the day, in addition to literally hundreds of additional staff deployed across the route, to take very early action the second you start to see a route degrade, the second you start to see the buses beginning to bunch up because maybe someone's parked. Immediate intervention. That's what will make this thing work.
Well, I'll just add one thing to Juliet's question. I think on the DOT side, a lot of feedback really making sure, particularly places where we're going to have big bus stops, and key intersections like 14th and 1st or places down on Delancey Street, that we're keeping the curb clear, that we're also making sure we're providing enough loading zones to the extent that commercial activity needs to happen, we can accommodate it. So I think the elected officials and community board members have helped alert us to hot spots we're going to need to make sure we design right and that we're constantly monitoring.
The
Can I add one more thing?
Yeah.
Just one more thing they came up, which I think they are addressing in the agencies, which is just monitoring the HOV. In other words, how do you do that without backing up? And that is definitely being addressed. But it was another tweak that could that presented itself today.
Okay, Dan.
The question on traffic, to follow up on this luxury bus. I mean, why can't the city put its foot down and say no luxury buses? Why do you even have to compete with something else that could?
Well, I mean, the city does have a fairly complex set of both TLC and city concession rules, so I don't know legally that I can just wave my wand and ban something that has been licensed. But that said, I think, listen, Dan, we are monitoring what we're starting to hear about what some of these companies are proposing. We're going to be in communication with them, and I think we will try, if we need to act as aggressively as we can, but I do have some legal constraints. I don't completely dictate what can go where. But I think, again, the design, I'm hoping the design we've made, particularly with the dedicated bus lanes, it is really going to encourage people to ride buses.
It's a follow-up to the politicians on hand, each of you, or however many like. What questions did you have for the transit officials here? What did you ask, and what was your concern?
We definitely asked about construction, which is what came up earlier. We definitely asked about construction was one of them, and how the Department of Buildings will be monitored and maybe not have any permits again along the routes, 14th Street being the most challenging. A lot of folks who know well from the community board or elected asked about First Avenue and how turns are going to be made and where bus stops are going to be and how many buses are going to line up at a particular bus stop. Those were some examples. Lots of questions in where will people know that there is a subway that's already filled. So if you're on the bus, get off on this subway or the next subway. And it was articulately answered by real-time information being shared by the different agencies. So could we have an app that will give people real-time information? Those were some of the questions. Others? Harvey, do you want to ask that?
So I think we were also concerned about the impact it would have in neighborhoods. So my district is the east side of Manhattan. People would be having an increased volume. What does that mean for pedestrian traffic, safety of 14th Street? First Avenue, Third Avenue, traffic that's turning up First and Third Avenue. Really, there are large implications, not just for people coming from Brooklyn to Manhattan, but the implication that we have for Manhattan, making sure that all New Yorkers are safe. So I think they've really had a thoughtful conversation about what's going on. I was really glad to hear they thought through a lot of the questions, but there's still things that we don't know. Until we get this thing off the ground and rolling, we're going to have to continue to tweak it, because that bus stop might not be the best location on 1st and 15th because what the implications are for that corner, and we'll have to continue to revisit it. And I think they're both really open to hearing that feedback.
Did we hear from someone from Brooklyn?
And I would say that as the senator who represents both the east and the west side of Manhattan, I'm concerned about all the diesel buses that are going to be on 14th Street. It's good to know that we're going to have a handful of electric buses, but I think we want to push and prod to try to get CNG, other alternative fuels on 14th Street. We don't want the effect of a diesel train running back and forth on 14th Street. Although the intentions, of course, are admirable, we have to figure out the best fuel for the busway.
Do you know how many of the buses out of all the together
20.
are going to be electric?
15? Yeah, 15. Yeah, sure. So 15 in Manhattan, and then there's a further 10 that are deployed in routes in Brooklyn. So that's for a total of 25. But don't forget, and obviously this needs to post-date the tunnel reconstruction project. We have stated very clearly in the Fast Forward Modernization Plan of New York City Transit, it is our absolute stated objective to move to an all-electric fleet as soon as we possibly can. We need to make sure, though, that the charging facilities and that the technology works properly, because it is still emerging technology for buses, particularly for articulated buses. But certainly for the purposes of this closure, every available electric bus will be deployed either on the Manhattan side or the Brooklyn side, and that's a commitment that I've made today in front of the elected officials. Can I just make one other point? You asked about what did we learn, and the inference I took was from a negative perspective in terms of like construction on the route. I also saw one other thing that brought joy to my heart, and that is at one point along the route we went along a bus route that was unimpeded. and we sailed past. We absolutely sailed past a lineup of traffic in Brooklyn.
First Avenue in Manhattan.
First Avenue, we went along too. First Avenue, Manhattan, and on the Brooklyn side. But where bus lanes are properly policed and where people don't selfishly park in them, the bus could do its job. And the bus sailed along those bus routes, bus lanes, and we waved to the cars stuck in the traffic. I did in my head anyway. To those cars stuck in traffic, because that is the best possible advert there can be for public transit. If you'd taken the bus, you would have been there by now. So I want to see, and I made a shameless pitch to the elected officials, bus lanes, the way of the future.
Mr. Byford, today it's an August day. There are no kids in school. A lot of people are on vacation. So do you really think you're getting a real feel for how this is going to go?
Nope. And we talked about that exact point. We did say, transparency. We said on the bus that obviously today, because it was associated with a question about what the Williamsburg Bridge is normally like, we conceded absolutely that it's holiday season, the bridge isn't as busy as it should be. But to a certain extent, that made our point. Even with the lighter traffic, it was still a challenge getting across the bridge. All the more reason we need the HOV lanes, all the more reason we need the dedicated bus lanes, the HOV supervision, the other measures with NYPD that we're going to take. So.
In terms of breaking down the numbers a little bit more, how many buses are on the beat? And I know it's going to be a range of different ways. Are you going to have on the road? And how many people can they hold on a busy time? Just to give us some range of numbers.
So at the height there will be 80 buses per hour across the Williamsburg Bridge. So you can work that out. It's less than a bus every minute. So literally, we will be launching an additional bus less than once a minute. This service will be relentless. The buses themselves will be a mix of articulated buses and standard 40-footers like the one we got off. And the bus percentage of the overall challenge will be around 20%. So around about 70% will be handled by subways, around 20% by the buses, 25%, 5% via other means such as walking, cyclists, and the ferry.
So you're saying 70% will be handled by other lines?
Yeah, by alternate lines. So, for example, the G line, we will be extending the length of the G trains. Other lines, we will be increasing the service up to the maximum that we can via the signaling system. We're also doing other things that will become legacies for the community of this project, like reopening closed stations, widening stairways, enlarging the size of mezzanines. So if you like, that's some sort of payback to the community. One thing I should flag is this weekend we are undertaking extensive work on the L line, and that means that the service will turn back from Broadway Junction back to Rockaway. And why is that, you might ask? It's so that we can install the signaling adjustments whereby the trains can turn back at Bedford Avenue once the closure's up and running. But it's also so that we can progressively, and this is going to be a pattern going forward between now and April, really, how would I describe it? Provide sort of super maintenance to switches, to signals, to track, to escalators, to elevators, to pieces of equipment, to assets that will without question be worked way harder during the closure and that we cannot afford to fail.
Another tweet with
A couple more questions. Are you anywhere closer?
Andy, you mentioned earlier about quickness and getting a car out of the way. Have you or DOT requested any additional manpower from the NYPD traffic?
Did you want to take one?
Camera enforcement.
This is safe.
No, I mean, we're right. We will have on 14th Street camera.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, sorry, I'm sorry. We will have on 14th Street camera enforcement, and PD will be out in full force. We're working through what their extra personnel will be, but they will have a full plan that I think we've been talking to the MTA about, and it will be aggressive.
Do you have a
Andy,
plan for a local
what's the
access?
total number of people? I think they said 250,000 is going to be using all these services.
Yeah, on the Manhattan side, 50,000 people are affected on the Manhattan side. Who would? So it's, the overall figure is 225,000.
And why not just block 14th Street to all traffic and just have
We have tried to thread the needle, and as a result, I think mostly everyone is mad at us, but what we have tried to do is create a system where, again, from 3rd Avenue to 8th, and then from 9th Avenue back to 3rd, it's going to be bus only from 5 to 10, with an exception that we will allow local pickups and drop-offs for businesses and for residents, because we heard loud and clear. We've been doing a lot of engagement, as a lot of, town hall meetings, open houses, talking to elected officials, presenting to community boards. We heard loud and clear, this is a major street, obviously 14th Street. Tens of thousands of people live on it. So we are trying to create a balance, creating the pedestrian space and the space needed for Andy, again, to run his incredible bus operation while still accommodating best we can the needs of local residences. We based part of our design on what we saw they did up to, Andy's familiar with it, King Street up in Toronto, where they do it with streetcars, and the design has worked very well. I've talked to my counterpart up there about it. I'm going to be visiting it, but I think the other thing is this is a design that will be adjustable. We can adjust hours, we can adjust as we go. I think we've tried through all the feedback and all the work we've done to put the best plan forward to start with, and we're hoping it'll work, but we can make adjustments along the way if we need to.
We need 2 more.
Polly, you have coming up public hearings on the environmental review, and I know it's a little technical, but can you give us an update on how your relationship with the feds, federal transit officials, getting this environmental review done, and confident that the money you need from the feds flow into your hands?
Sure. Well, the hearing is tonight, so there's a public hearing at 2 Broadway tonight between 5 p.m. and 8 p.m., which is meant to be the forum whereby we talk about the outcome of the environmental assessment that we've done with the FTA. From my perspective, I think it's gone very well. There was a lot to do. There was a lot of paperwork to get through and a lot of issues to tackle. But I think that we're in a good place, that the feds understand, the FTA understand the extent to which we really have tried to think through every possible angle of this project, not just from a customer perspective, but also from the impact upon the city and, critically, the impact on the environment. So I think it's been a good process. I look forward to hearing about tonight's discussion as to what people have to say about it.
Stephen has the last question here.
About the bike access on and off the Williamsburg Bridge, is the DOT doing anything to make the egresses larger to accommodate more bikers during the shutdown?
Right, and as you know, we have, I think, a pretty full bike plan for the L train shutdown, and I think one that is going to make cycling a really, really attractive option. We're going to have protected bike lane on Grand Street coming over the Williamsburg. We are going to work on improving. There's some security kind of obstructions when you come off the Williamsburg Bridge. We're going to work to make that a smoother ride. There's going to be a protected bike lane on Delancey that will connect to a lot of the other routes. And then, of course, we're going to have protected lanes here on 13th and 14th. Motivate is going to join us. We are working with them now to do a lot of infill, adding more bikes and more stations in the core of Manhattan and in Williamsburg. They are going to have 10 valet stations to help people ride, pick up, and drop off. They will also be running a pedal assist shuttle service for people who may find it a little hard to bike over the Williamsburg Bridge. It's a lot easier on a pedal assist bike. And this area that you are all standing in right now is going to be one of the key areas. We're going to have bike parking, valet service. We're really going to try and make this the hub because we think a lot of cyclists are going to want to come to this area. So it's a pretty comprehensive plan. But yes, we know that that entrance when you come on and off the Williamsburg Bridge at Delancey needs some refining.
Okay. Bus rides with the ferry that's going to, the Lower East Side route is launching on August 29th.
I didn't follow the question, I'm sorry.
Any tie-in with, like, the bus schedule to the new... With the ferry.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no, so absolutely. So, well, first up, there will be no question of people paying twice. So the fare policy will be integrated, and if you use the ferry, then effectively you get a transfer for the ride on the SBS bus that will meet that ferry, and vice versa. And yes, absolutely, the schedules will be integrated. But the ferry won't run all night, and there are practical reasons for that. Not least, the ferries are mandated by the Coast Guard to honk when they leave, and that we feel that would just be very disruptive to local communities. And we also predict, our modelling shows that the need for the ferry would drop off overnight. But there will be alternatives. There will be an overnight bus service. But once that ferry starts up again in the morning, the integrated scheduling kicks in once again. Okay, that's all we got time for. Thank you, folks.
We have to challenge Marcia, that's Staten Island.
Okay.